Hey, what's up, guys? This is Friday, May 9th, and today is going to be based on faith over fear. You know, many things have happened in my life where I had to demonstrate faith. Every day, we all have to demonstrate faith. You know what they say, faith without works is dead. Um, Early in my teenage years, I demonstrated this faith, this blind faith, even when I didn't want to proceed with going to Phoenix, Arizona, not knowing anybody but Jazz. But in doing that, you know, it really helped me with getting out my comfort zone. So when things had happened, when I came back to Baltimore permanently, and I had to like deal with things that was uncomfortable or the humility of working jobs that I felt like, well, people will think that is below them, you know, getting paid $40, you know, or $30 or less, or $20 for 8 hours working at a temp agency called Labor Ready, having to get up, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning just to get a slot because, you had addicts and you had people that were just coming out of jail and you had, you know, just competition of people wanting to have a slot to be able to get that $20 or $30 for 8 hours a day, renovating abandoned houses that, had rats and, you know, taking a hammer and hitting concrete. Whereas though when you each and every time you hit the concrete, you hear the vibration from your bones. So when it came time for me to be able to work a job that I applied for Craigslist by High Fresh at Johns Hopkins Hospital, in the nutrition department, I was happy. Yeah, it was like $150 every 2 weeks that I was getting, but that was better than $20 a day. It might have been the same equivalent, it might have been the same amount, but and even when I got the job, my mother was still living at the time. I had asked her, I said, "Ma, you sure I got the job?" She was like, "Look, yes, you got the job." And now it makes sense as to why I got the job because it was more so of a under. It was at Johns Hopkins Hospital, but it wasn't a department that was Hopkins. It was like a separate, if that makes any sense. So getting this job, it allowed me to have discipline because when I first started working at Baja Fresh, this had gave me the opportunity to, start fresh. And, Noah wasn't at the hospital yet, but it was funny because when I started working inside the hospital, people assumed that I worked at the hospital, because it looks like, you reached a certain amount of success, but it was just the nutrition department. And I remember I worked so hard, y'all. I was working hard. And it was one point where I was trying to set up the line because when you set up the line, you had the opportunity to, work the morning shift. So I started on night shifts working 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. in the morning. And this required me to get, some of the items done. It was very slow, but that shift really wasn't, I didn't like it. But I wanted to work on a morning shift. And it got to the point where I earned it. And, the morning shift was a little different because you had to have things done and you had to have things prepped for the next day. And the person that was prepping things for the next day when the night shift was flowing was me. So when I had, you know, got on the morning shift, it really was difficult, maybe because I had to start fresh. So I remember one time I was rushing to get carnitas on the line. It's what, it's pork. And getting the carnitas out of the plastic wrap, I took a butcher knife and I sliced the plastic open. And this was during rush hour, and I made a mistake and I cut my finger. You probably can't see it here, but I cut it. It was like, it was gruesome. And being though that a job like that was more so like, I want to say under the table, you know, I didn't get the proper care. It wasn't like PTO, no time off, no none of that. And you would think because it's inside Hopkins, but it wasn't, right? It's separate. And it got, I had to still make money. So I remember I had wrapped my finger up after I was treated, after they kicked out money for me to get stitches and everything like that. And about a day or two later, with my pinky still being sore, I was back on the line wrapping burritos with a latex glove and running the whole line, wrapping burritos. And then when lunchtime came, when it started to die down, when the rush hour started to die down, everybody would leave the unit. So I was stuck there, and people knew that I worked hard, so they took advantage of that. And I remember servicing the doctors and the whoever would want a burrito, and I remember or tostada salad, and I remember serving them and then taking the gloves off to run the cashier, and somebody was watching. And I was frustrated. I was upset. I was just like, why am I keep doing this, man? Why people keep leaving me on the line? It was like when I started getting on day shift, I started recognizing that, you know, the same relax or chill mode was happening during the day. And this is why when I came in during the night, when I used to work night shifts, that nothing was getting done. This is why that I felt like, yo, wow, people in the day wasn't doing what they needed to actually help the night to progress. So a lot of the slack that we had to pick up on the night shift, I started recognizing that this is why we had to pick it up. But that had trickled down to me working hard, still now being on a day shift. And I remember somebody was watching me doing a whole line by myself, and this one person was like, "Hey, look, I see what you've been doing. I see that you've been working hard. You've been servicing people, and I want to tell you that if you go across the street, there's a job position that's opening up. And I want you to really act fast and apply. I'm going to put a good word in for you. I just need you to show up." And I was already frustrated, but I was faithful over that one job. I was faithful over the tasks at hand and not knowing that nobody was watching me. But in that situation, somebody was, and there was an open door, and I took it, man. I went across the street immediately. I think it was the next day. I filled out the requisition number that the person gave me, and I got an interview. I didn't say anything, and then here I am walking into the job that wasn't celebrating me. That I mean, they had jokes for me. I'm talking about, they had, and here it is. I'm about to check out. So the very person that they leaned on, the very person that they was expecting to pick up this slack, here it is. This person don't even need this job anymore. It got to the point where my checks was piling up at that place because they paid every week, and I wasn't even coming to get the checks. I was working my main job, my new full-time job, which is at Hopkins University. Hopkins University had more benefits, and I was hired as a cage washer. And and when I went there, I thought the position was like washing cages, but when I get there, at the job, which I didn't mind. The guy Rick, he even noticed my background, and he said, "Hey man, I see that you have some things, but you know what? We're willing to overlook that because we need this. Do you need this position filled immediately?" So that's what they did, man. And I worked there. That was my most recent job that I had prior to me resigning April 5th of 2022 to pursue my art full time. And even when I was leaving my job, my supervisor, he always was encouraging me to leave the job. He was always encouraging me to, like, he always quoted this film called Good Will Hunting. He knew I was even a hard worker, even at that job. I took my hard work everywhere I went. But just having faith, faith is one of the weapons that you can utilize for the opposition. The opposition is always going to be things that's going to go against you. But we have to exercise that faith muscle each and every time, even when we don't see it, even when we get frustrated, even when people are beating us down, and we know we're doing right, and something happens. Something happens when we become the right people. Something happens when we are the right person. So I encourage you today, if you're in a situation that you may need to pull that faith muscle out. All right, you know what? This has happened, but I got a faith that God will see me through. I have faith that what I believe in, wherever you may believe in, but me, I'm a firm believer in Christ. I'm a firm believer in God. I believe that, nothing that He puts us through is null and void. All things work together for the good for those who love the Lord, according to His purpose and His will. And I believe, and in that belief, as a man thinketh, so is he. In that belief, it pushes you into your miracle territory. So I have so many stories on faith and even me acting out on faith. This is supposed to be me talking about when I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I remember when my mother called me and she had said that the detectives was here to speak to me and find me because my mother, even when the old house got raided, my mother moved and they found out where she lived at and they were looking for me. And I was in Phoenix, Arizona at the time. I was supposed to go to school, but I didn't. So here it is. I was calling my mother asking for money for her to transfer me some money, and the detectives just so happened to be there while I was calling her. And then she said, "No, they're here right now." So she put them on the phone with me. And then the detective, he was just like, "Hey, Mr. Evans, what are you doing? Wow, you're in Phoenix, Arizona. What are you doing in Phoenix?" "Oh man, I'm going to school. I was supposed to go to school, but I didn't go to school." And I'll touch bases back on that for the On the Run series. But to make a longer story short, when he told me that I needed to come back home, I didn't believe him. He said, "Hey man, you need to come back home and check this out. I see that you're changing. I see that you're making attempts to change your life. I tell you what, I won't even show up to the case, but you have to go through the system. What's the system? You got to get processed. I tell you what, if you get processed, you will not ever see me. I will never show up to the court." When he says this, I'm in Phoenix. My case was fresh. I didn't believe him. Fast forward to me finally being back in Baltimore. I face my case. I'll share this with you in other series, but I'm doing a little speed up. The Fed, as what he had said that he wouldn't do, he did not do. He didn't show up to any of the cases. And I was about to be on the run again. But when I met DeAndre McCullough through my friend James Palu. James, he had introduced me to DeAndre when we shot the Baltimore Love thing. If you look on my profile, you look on my channel, you'll see this video of me and DeAndre McCullough. He was a good friend of mine. He shared with his mother that I was attempting to go on the run again. His mother's name is Fran Boyd. Their life was actually made into an HBO series called The Corner. Fran got whiff of me wanting to run again. And she said, "No, you're not gonna run again on my watch. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna treat it like you're one of my peoples that I look after," because she worked for a program looking after individuals who were, fighting drug addiction as what she had overcame. Sure enough, she came to my house in the morning the next day, her and DeAndre, and they took me to my court case. And when they took me to court, I only had a public defender because I couldn't afford a lawyer. And I didn't see, when I went there, the person that was on trial, the detective, he wasn't there. He didn't show up. And I remember the public defender, he had a little envelope. He was like, "Hey man, it seems because the Iraq War was still going on." He said, "It seems like the people that's in charge of this case, the Fed or whatever he said, man, he might be handling bigger cases because he didn't show up." And then I had another my court date got postponed, and then I went to the next court case. I went to the next court case after that, and still no show. And mentioning this, that I had wore a shirt and tie, my mother said, "Make sure that Keo, you go there with a shirt and tie each and every court case." And I didn't want to go because it's like, I had to get on the bus, people had to see me, or, because eventually when friends started to see that I was good on my own, you know, she allowed me to make my own decision. So the last time I had to go to court, I caught the bus on my own. I wore a shirt and tie, and I went there, and I was so upset. And I wore pretty much this suit that was given to me, my first adult suit that I've had, by Donnie Glover. Wearing a suit to court, the judge, she was in a bad mood this morning. And she said, "You know what? I'm going to make an example out of somebody today." And she said, "Akio Evans, come up here," because I was next. And she said, "You've been coming here, and every time you've been coming here, you've been respecting my court. And because you respect the court, what I'm going to do for you to show an example of all these people who are coming not in the attire, I'm going to throw your case out today because you've been coming here for months and They haven't been showing up. But I'm gonna do this for you today. But please don't come to my court. I don't want to ever see you again. But thank you for respecting my court. Do you guys know that I had charges that was pending on me? The utterance currency charge was 10 years. I had charges that was like outstanding. They was trying to throw me the book, and the detective knew this. That's why he said he wasn't going to ever show up to the case because this would have ruined me. But my case got thrown out. I didn't even have faith in myself to stand, but I walked into that courthouse after friend pretty much said, "No, you're going to do this." So some faith was in me. Faith was in me because somebody shared that it's possible. So I hope that this video inspires you that whatever you're going through, that is more than possible for you to face whatever you need to face. But faith without works is dead. Had I not done the work of putting a shirt and tie on, respecting the court, making sure I went to go to my court dates, that was the work. If I never done the work, faith without works is dead. I would have been on the run again. What? DeAndre was like, nah, dog. Like, yo, you already did that. You already been on the run. I even met DMX. I explained that story before, how he even told me, like, yo, go home, do your time. By the grace of God, I didn't have to do anything because I ran for a few years, and also the detective and the Fed, they kept their word. They did not show up to the case. I promise kept. So I encourage you today to have blind faith and just watch God do something new in you, through you, for you, and for others. So that's Friday's message. I hope that resonates with somebody. I know I always keep a lot of open tabs out. So if I mention anything that I didn't close, meaning like stories, please leave a comment, leave some feedback so I can actually, I want to build this conversation with you guys. But that's today's conversation, you know, um, faith over fear. Let me know what you think. All right. Peace. Appreciate you guys. Well, I tell you, Mike, Mike right here. Peace and much love, much respect. And thank you guys for tapping in.